What is up, guys? This is Odd Job Entertainment bringing you another video, and I am getting so sick of re-recording this. I don't know what happened, but it seems like every audio setting that I had set up previously got deleted. Same with the RSI Connie redesign that I had been working on at the beginning of April, and I really wish that this was just an April Fool's joke. That would be so much more convenient. But I did accidentally delete the entire file set for the Connie redesign. For some reason, I stored them in the same spot where I stored the videos for the Connie, and when I was trying to clear up more space, because videos take up a lot of space, I deleted it. And it kills me to say that, because there was so much work that went into those. But hopefully this will be the last time I have to record this. I've turned the gain way down on my microphone, which I never moved that knob, but for some reason in Premiere it was peaking out all the time, so it really wasn't sounding good. Hopefully this is sounding good to you guys. But in making that massive blunder, it gave me some time to reflect on things, and one of the common themes in what I was talking about in those previous videos was just how small these details are, and I decided that I need to find out if I can actually make these or not. I use a Bamboo X1C with a 0.6mm nozzle. And so 0.6 millimeters is the smallest line that my printer can reliably make. Now I can equip something as small as a 0.2 millimeter nozzle, but I don't want to. And the reason why is because I use my Bamboo all the time for larger functional parts. So swapping nozzles, while it is not particularly difficult to do, I just don't have the motivation to do that. So we're sticking with the 0.6 millimeter nozzle, and at the scale that we're talking about, this is really something that would be best printed on a resin printer anyways. Problem is I don't have one of those. Resin printers are entirely different from FDM printing, and I need to make sure that I've done enough research so that I can do things safely before I bring one into my home. Resins can release a lot of noxious fumes, they can be toxic to your health, they can cause cancer, so unless you really know what you're doing, resin printing is not the very safest thing to get involved with, and I want to live long and prosper, so I need to make sure that if I get a resin printer that I know what I'm doing with it. Part of that would be having it out in the garage where it's not going to be near any people in their living environment, but as you may know, if you're a longtime fan of the channel, the garage needs some help before it can house any additional items. So for the time being, we're just going to try and make it work with the X1C and see how far we get. In the interest of seeing if we can actually do these small details, we're focusing on just making a door today. Take it as a learn to walk before you run kind of deal. We're starting with something really basic, really simple, and from there we can see what our capabilities are and scale up. So we're using the RSI Galaxy for inspiration. Found a picture of one of their doors closed, which was actually kind of a hard photo to find. A lot of the doors that are shown in the RSI Galaxy, because they're concept art and they're just trying to show off all the inside of the ship, they don't have a lot of closed doors, but thankfully I did find one. So we're incorporating a diagonal cross member, just like is shown in the concept art. And at some point we're going to duplicate this door, flip it to the other side, and we're going to make a variant of this door that has a window. And that's where the real challenge of everything comes in, because we're talking about a door that is supposed to be representative of a 2-meter high door in real life, but at 1/100th scale we're talking 2 centimeters. Well, when you're talking 2 centimeters, that means your window is 2 to 5 millimeters, and since the door is only like 2.5 millimeters thick, we quickly start to run out of space where we can actually make these different kinds of height adjustments to add these kinds of details. Again, this would be better done on a resin printer. I plan on getting one in the future, but for the time being, it's just not something that makes sense for me at the moment. So trying to make this printable for everybody using an FDM printer is where that real challenge comes into play. first blunder I make in trying to make this window happen was thinking that I was ever going to get an acrylic sheet to fit inside this door. The smallest I could find was 0.4 millimeters, but that doesn't give me enough clearance to have the windowsill and the added relief details in the door. So at some point I realized that, hey, why don't I just cut up water bottles or something? Like, those are thinner and those are also free. Why am I paying for an expensive acrylic sheet when I can just take garbage and recycle? And that ends up saving me because it gives me just enough space that I can have the windowsill and have the track / slot for the plastic to slide in for our little makeshift window. Unfortunately, it is not all sunshine and rainbows. There are some further challenges in making this window actually happen. Because of the way FDM printers work, what you're actually doing is you're melting plastic and then you're trying to lay it down in a line. But that line isn't really a line. It has some level of variation, and you can correct for a lot of that by using something called linear advance or pressure advance. And basically what that'll do is when you get to the start or end of a line, it will decrease the amount of pressure on the nozzle to remove any of those blobs that result from going around a corner, coming to a sudden stop, and stuff like that. And it does a pretty good job of this, but it's not perfect, and there are still some scenarios where you can run into issues. Because it is a molten piece of plastic, it's more like a booger or a slime than it is to a solid object while it's being printed. And so you can have little trails that drag from one part to another, and at these tiny distances that we're talking about, that ends up occluding the window on one side and making it so that the plastic cannot be slid in. And I think that that's what they call foreshadowing in the cinema business, but we'll get to that in a minute. Here we are in Bamboo Studio. This is the proprietary slicer software for the X1C, as well as the other Bamboo Lab lineup of printers. It's based off of Prusa Slicer, so you will see a lot of similar features if you're used to using a Prusa machine. And one of the really cool features of the X1C is that because I do have an AMS, I can easily tell it to use multiple filaments. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to print all of these pieces at the same time. Now, under normal circumstances, that creates a purge block that you can see in the top right of the screen, and that's not desirable because it's a waste product. It's not needed in this case because our parts are so small. We can just space them out further from each other and then print them one by one, and the printer will not need a purge tower in that case. That's what we end up doing. But you see that we run into our first issue here on the slicer. These walls are so thin that it's struggling to actually know what to do with them. And so we end up missing half of our window. So the fix to that is pretty simple. We go back into Onshape. We make the windowsill thicker. We make the slot thinner. And this is the point where I realized that, oh yeah, I have lots of free clear PETG lying around in the form of bottles. So I can just use that, and that's going to be a lot easier. So we're back in Bamboo Studio with that fix in place, and now it should print, right? So we send it to the printer, and this is honestly one of the things that I love absolutely about the X1C is I'm sitting at my desk and then sending a job to the printer. I don't have to take a micro SD card down to it. I don't have to walk down the stairs. I don't have to wait for it to heat up and do all this stuff. I can just watch it all remotely from my desk. This is a huge boon for a 3D printer. Here we are, we're watching our first stack up of prints go through. Prints the pieces one by one, no purge tower, very efficient. And here we have some footage through the new Sony ZV-E10. You may have seen some clips of this in other videos, but I did recently get this new camera as a way to enhance your viewing experience. So I hope that that's something that you realize and benefit from. But this should help you realize just how small these doors are that we're talking about. That little metal rod is 2.5 millimeters thick, and it looks massive in this frame. And you can also see my thumb there in the bottom right. absolutely gargantuan, and I don't have particularly big hands. We also see some limitations of the design. Clearly the doors are kind of jumping the track a little bit, so that's something that we'll need to consider when we make the final version. We'll need some way to retain them in their position and keep them from jumping out. But let's try and get that window installed, shall we? So we've got our clear plastic and we've got our little door. What can we do to put them together? Well, we cut out a small piece of plastic, and obviously you can tell I'm still getting used to trying to keep everything in frame. And at this scale, it's like an inch movement of my hand means that I'm way off frame. So this is gonna take some practice too. But we've got a small piece of plastic and we're just using some plastic snips. I actually got this for when I was assembling a Gundam model. They're pretty nice. Nothing too fancy though. They're just real basic snips. And then we try to put it in the hole and it doesn't go through. And I make the mistake of thinking that it's due to the height of the window. That's not the case. It's actually due to part of the window sill being completely occluded. The slot printed fine on one side, but some molten plastic got pulled across the opening on the other side. And so there's no way that this tiny piece of plastic is getting through. So there's the slot and there's the other side. And wait a minute, it's closed. It's not working. So we slide the magnifier over, which has some nice ring lights on it, which I'm realizing is great for this shot. Everything looks nicely lit. It actually looks like I know what I'm doing, except that that slot is closed. So what are we gonna do? We're going to change some slicer settings. There's something called Classic and Arachne. That's different names for wall generators. Arachne allows the nozzle to use a reduced pressure in thin areas to try and get more details printed. The trade-off is you do lose a little bit of accuracy from what I understand, and it can't do everything. So in this case, we do get it so that the window can be printed, but we do lose some quality in some other areas where the Arachne just isn't able to compensate the same way. It's still kind of a beta feature for Bamboo, at least. It's more established in other printer brands, but still learning and working out the kinks with the X1C. Hey, we got purple lights. That's because I've got a BL LED controller. I'm still doing some troubleshooting, trying to figure out how to make that work consistently. I'm having some issues where it disconnects from the Wi-Fi. But in the meantime, if I remember to reboot it every now and then I actually get some really nice lighting for the printer, which is pretty sweet. All right, let's try this one more time. Let's try and get that tiny piece of plastic into the other tiny piece of plastic. Yay, it slid in this time. So now we're 14 minutes into a video about a tiny, tiny plastic door. Now, for you, it's 14 minutes. For me, this represents about 3 hours of work, just getting this door to work as good as it does. And I don't even think it's that great. So there's still some tweaks that we'll probably have to make, but this has been a good learning experience for me in the kinds of challenges that are going to exist when we're working at such a small scale. Let me know what you guys think though. This is a very much more granular approach to doing these kinds of design videos. And do you like this approach? Do you think that I need to just condense things more and just show you the highlights? I totally understand if that's the case. I think that this could be a good example of what the design process actually looks like. A lot of times you make a design and it does not work the first time. So you have to do a couple tweaks, you have to reiterate, and then you get something that works, but you still might need to go further down that reiteration process. That's kind of where we're at right now. We have a door that works, but it could be better. Ways to improve it would be to use a resin printer. That would basically free up all of the resolution issues that I'm having, and we'd get a nice crisp print. I might just have to bum services off of a friend who already has a resin printer, but that can get pretty pricey pretty quick, especially from the perspective that they might not want to be my friend after I have them print all this stuff. Another way we could improve this process is we could use a different scale. We could go for a 1/50th scale instead of 1/100th. I like 1/100 because it makes the math super easy. But heck, if we're going to make things bigger, why not just print it 1:1, right? Of course, the obvious downside to that is the 2-meter door is now a 2-meter door, and I need a parking lot to fit the 61-meter ship that we're trying to make. So maybe not 1:1, but 50:1 might work. Even 75:1 would make things a little easier to print. But these are the kinds of decisions you have to think about when you're working on a project like this, and this has kind of shown me that maybe I haven't given that as much consideration as I ought to have done previously. But anyways, let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, share, comment, subscribe, do all the YouTube things. And until next time, this is Odd Job Entertainment, signing off.